On the edge of a cold city, where marble gates divided wealth from desperation, a small boy lay curled under a frayed blanket. His name was Elijah. Just 9 years old, his skin dark as polished earth, his eyes wide with the quiet weight of survival. He had no memory of where he was born, only the aching echo of a lullaby once whispered into his ear long ago. Each night, Elijah wandered the streets with bare feet, searching for warmth in a world that often looked away. But there was one place he returned to, again and again, a grand mansion on the corner of Willow Avenue. It stood like a palace from another world, wrapped in ivy and trimmed with gold. He didn't know why, but something about it made him feel safe, like the soft glow of candlelight behind its windows remembered him. He never begged at its gates, never knocked at its door. He simply curled up beneath the stone balcony that jutted from the second floor, where wind could not reach him and shadows seemed kinder. There, he would close his eyes and dream of a mother's arms he no longer remembered. He dreamed of stories, read aloud of warmth that came not from fire, but from love. He dreamed ... And then he woke to the morning cold. Elijah never knew that this mansion had once belonged to his family. He never knew that decades earlier, a young girl with skin like his had run barefoot through its halls, laughing and dancing, her braids swinging in the summer sun. That girl was his mother, but her name had been erased. The current owners of the mansion were wealthy and well-known. Their photographs graced newspapers. Their charity galas dazzled the rich. But behind the portraits on the wall and the glittering chandeliers hung secrets too heavy to breathe. Secrets buried in shame. Secrets that had a heartbeat, and that heartbeat now slept outside their gate. One night, as clouds rolled across the moon and silence blanketed the street, a figure appeared at an upstairs window. An elderly woman, her silver hair twisted into a bun, peered out from behind a lace curtain. Her eyes narrowed, fixed on the boy below. She had seen him before sleeping there like a ghost of memory. Something about the curve of his cheek, the shape of his jaw, the sorrow in his brow. It stirred something deep in her bones. Her hands trembled as she held the curtain tighter. She had once known a girl who looked just like him. A girl who had disappeared, swallowed by time and scandal. And now, as the wind whispered through the trees, she wondered if fate had brought that forgotten child's child back to her doorstep. Down below, Elijah stirred in his sleep, unaware that the house he slept beside had once echoed with his mother's laughter, that the woman watching him had once held her as a baby. That history, long buried, was beginning to stir. The night passed in silence. But something had changed, because sometimes destiny begins not with a door opened, but with a child sleeping just outside. The morning light was soft, filtered through a sky painted gray with the breath of winter. Elijah woke slowly, his limbs stiff from the stone beneath him. The world around him moved as if in a dream. Cars rolled past, people bustled by, and still no one saw him. Or perhaps they did, but chose not to. He folded his blanket carefully, pressing out the corners with the pride of someone who had so little and yet treated it like treasure. Then he stood and looked up at the mansion, tall, timeless, unreachable. He had always believed it belonged to someone too far above him, like the stars. But that morning, something tugged at his chest. A strange pull, as though the house itself remembered him, even if he didn't remember it. Inside, the elderly woman from the window sat at a vanity table, her hand frozen on a silver hairbrush. She had barely slept. Her mind played tricks on her visions of the past bleeding into the present. Could it be? Could the boy truly be connected to the girl who had vanished all those years ago? She opened a drawer slowly, her fingers trembling as they brushed against an old photo tucked beneath yellowed paper. It was faded now, the edges curling, but the image remained clear. A little girl, no older than 5, stood barefoot on the mansion's lawn, her smile wide and wild. Her skin glowed under the sun, her eyes bright with dreams. That girl was her goddaughter Camille, Elijah's mother. The memory hit her like a storm. She remembered Camille's mother, a strong woman, with pride in her voice and fire in her soul. But pride is dangerous when it burns near those who hold power. When Camille's mother fell ill, the family chose silence. No funeral, no goodbye. Just vanishing, the girl disappeared from the home. And no one ever spoke her name again, until... Now Elijah wandered the city, his stomach hollow, but his spirit stubborn. He didn't know what he was looking for. A sign. A face. A feeling. But all he had was the strange longing that returned each evening, drawing him back to the place where he slept beneath the balcony, where the bricks carried echoes of a mother's footsteps long ago. As he walked back that night, the wind carried the scent of something familiar, jasmine. He didn't know why it mattered, but his heart skipped. He stopped by the garden wall and peeked through the iron bars. The flowers blooming there matched a fragment from a dream he had once, where a woman with warm eyes bent down to kiss his forehead. He closed his eyes, and on the other side of the window, the old woman watched again. Only this time, she was not alone. A man stood beside her, a servant of the house who had worked there since youth. She pointed down at the boy, whispering her suspicions, and he froze. He too had seen the boy, and like her, he had kept silent. But now, the truth pressed too hard against the walls of the mansion. That night, Elijah fell asleep early, his blanket pulled up to his chin. He didn't hear the whisper of footsteps from within the house. He didn't see the flicker of a curtain, gently drawn. And he didn't notice the envelope being prepared upstairs, a letter that had been hidden away for years, never meant to be opened. But by morning, it would be missing from the drawer, and someone would be gone. Rain fell softly that morning, like tears too gentle to be noticed. Elijah did not stir right away. The cold had crept into his bones during the night, and the stone beneath him had grown slick. Still he remained, curled like a question without an answer, beneath the balcony of a mansion that watched him without words. Inside the house, silence reigned. The old woman's room was empty, the bed untouched, the curtains drawn. No one knew where she had gone, not the staff, not the family. Who owned the estate? Only the butler, older now, slower in his steps, carried with him the weight of a secret he hadn't meant to keep. Clutched in his hand was an envelope. It was yellowed at the corners, sealed with wax that had cracked long ago. There was no name on the front, only a date. A date that matched the birth year of a child no one ever claimed. Inside the envelope was a letter, written in trembling ink, a confession, a memory. A warning. It was written by a young woman named Camille. In her words, the truth unraveled like thread from a forgotten dress. Camille had once lived in this mansion, raised by distant relatives after her own mother passed. But she was never accepted, not fully. Her skin was darker than theirs, her voice louder, her laughter too free. They let her stay, but not belong. When Camille grew older, she fell in love. Not with someone rich, not with someone chosen for her, but with someone kind, someone poor, a man who worked with his hands and smelled of oil and sunlight. Their love was quiet, hidden. And when she became pregnant, the mansion turned its back on her completely. She was cast out without a word, disowned, erased. In the letter, Camille wrote of her hope that one day, someone would find her child. That if her life ended early, as she feared it might, her son would carry her spirit forward. That he would be brave enough to find where he belonged. And now, decades later, her son slept outside the very walls that had driven her away. The butler read the letter over and over, each time seeing the boy's face clearer in his mind. Elijah, the child in the cold. He had never known Camille had a son. None of them had. They had made sure not to know Dot, and now the house was haunted by the echo of what they had done. That night, Elijah remained beneath the balcony, unaware of the storm building inside the mansion. The old woman had vanished, but her presence still lingered in the air. Portraits on the wall seemed to watch more closely. The fireplace burned more nervously, and the servants whispered behind closed doors. Elijah dreamed again. This time, it was not of a woman's voice or jasmine in the wind. This time, he saw a face, clear, familiar, a young woman with eyes like his, standing in the mansion's grand hall, holding out her hand toward him, and behind her, a locked door he had never seen. He woke with a jolt. And just a few feet away, under the flicker of a street lamp, something lay on the ground. It was an envelope. His fingers reached for it. Slowly, but just as he opened it, a shadow passed behind the curtains upstairs. Someone had been watching. Elijah sat alone beneath the pale light of dawn, his fingers trembling as they held the envelope. The paper was soft, worn thin with age. The ink inside had faded slightly, but the words remained, like a whisper reaching across time. He could not understand everything, but he felt something awaken within him. The name Camille appeared more than once, and a single line kept echoing in his mind. If he ever finds this house, it means my soul has led him home. Elijah didn't know who Camille was. He didn't know why her words felt like a memory hiding in his bones. But in that moment, he understood one thing clearly: he was not a mistake. He came from someone who loved him deeply, even if she had vanished before he could speak her name. Inside the mansion, the walls were not as silent as before. The servants exchanged worried glances, and the family who owned the estate began to sense the atmosphere shift. The butler, who had once stood straight with pride, now walked as if burdened by a truth too heavy to bear. He had not told them what he had read. He had not told them that the child sleeping beneath their balcony was, by blood, tied to the very heart of their legacy. But secrets have their own breath. And this one had begun to whisper through the corridors, brushing against picture frames, rattling doorknobs and stirring locked drawers. Dust covered too many truths, but nothing stays buried forever. Elijah stayed close to the mansion that day. He wandered through the garden fence, drawn by the scent of jasmine once again. He did not know why the flowers brought tears to his eyes, but he knelt by them, touched their petals, and listened to the wind. Somewhere deep inside, something told him, she walked here once. As the sky darkened and the clouds gathered again, Elijah returned to his place beneath the balcony. The envelope was folded and tucked close to his chest, hidden in his shirt. He felt as if he were protecting something sacred. And he was. Far above him, the butler entered a room he had avoided for years, a locked attic, full of covered furniture and forgotten trunks. He lit a lamp and moved slowly to a carved wooden box. Inside it were photographs, journals, and pieces of a life that had been removed from the mansion's memory. There, in a leather-bound book, was the truth. A photo of Camille as a young woman, a smile that matched Elijah's, a birth record hidden beneath a hospital bill, a name long scratched out but never truly gone. Elijah. The old man fell to his knees. For all these years, the boy had been waiting just outside, and none of them had opened the door. But the truth was no longer content to sleep. That night, thunder rolled across the sky. Rain pelted the earth. Elijah huddled beneath his blanket, eyes open, heart pounding. And then through the shadows of the storm a door creaked open, not the front gate, not the balcony above, but a side door. Quiet, careful. Someone stepped outside, and this time, they were walking toward him. The rain softened to a drizzle as the door creaked open. Elijah, soaked and shivering beneath his blanket, raised his eyes toward the figure stepping into the night. The light behind them cast a long shadow, but their steps were slow, cautious, as if they were afraid of breaking the silence that had lasted far too long. It was the butler. His face was pale, his hands hidden beneath a heavy coat. He had spent his entire life serving the people inside that house, protecting their image, obeying their silence. But now, as he looked down at the boy curled beneath the balcony, he saw not a stranger, but a child who had once been theirs. A child who should have been inside all along. Elijah did not move. He watched the man closely, unsure whether to run or stay. He had been chased away too many times by angry shopkeepers, ignored by passers-by, and told with stares that he did not belong. But the butler did not speak. Instead, he knelt slowly, placing something at Elijah's feet. It was a small bundle wrapped in cloth, dry bread, warm cloth, and a folded photograph. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing back into the mansion, the door closing behind him like a sigh. Elijah stared at the bundle. He touched the cloth first. It was soft, thick. The bread was still warm, the kind that came from ovens, not trash bins. But it was the photograph that stopped his breath. It was her, the woman from his dreams. The one who smiled with eyes like his. Her arms were open in the picture, reaching toward the camera, toward him. On the back, written in faded ink, were 4 words: Camille, my light forever. He clutched it to his chest and cried. Not loud, not broken, but the kind of crying that rises from somewhere deeper than memory. From the soul. In the attic above, the butler stood by the window, watching. He knew the boy would not understand yet. But truth is patient. It waits in corners, in photographs, in gestures as small as a folded blanket or a shared meal. And soon, the truth would speak. Over the next few days, Elijah noticed the world shifting. A gardener who used to ignore him now left fruit near the gate. A maid who once pulled the curtains shut now opened them in the mornings. No one said a word. No one came to him directly. But the house had begun to breathe differently. As if the walls were remembering. As if the mansion was waking up from a long, shameful sleep. Elijah kept the photo close always, hidden in the inside pocket of his jacket. Every night, he stared at it before closing his eyes. He no longer felt invisible. He no longer felt alone. But peace is never simple. And not every truth is welcome. Because deep inside the mansion, in a locked study room, the owner of the estate, a man who had inherited wealth, power, and pride, found the attic door left open. He found the box, he found the letter, and he found the truth that his family had buried for decades. His face grew cold. His hands tight, and before the sun could rise again, he gave an order that would change everything. Darkness fell thick that night, not just over the sky, but over the house itself. The warmth that had quietly crept through the mansion in recent days was gone, replaced by a chill sharper than the wind outside. The owner of the estate, a man who wore his last name like armor, sat alone in his study. The envelope open before him. He had read every word. Camille's name, confession. The mention of a child, and worst of all, the realization that the boy sleeping outside, the child they all ignored, was not a stranger. He was family, but not the kind they celebrated in grand halls or displayed in portraits. Elijah was a reminder, a mirror, proof that the past could not stay buried. And to a man whose pride had always been louder than his conscience, that was something he could not accept. He summoned the staff the next morning. The message was simple. The boy must go. No reasons were spoken. No explanation given. Just a firm instruction. His presence near the house was no longer to be tolerated. And the butler, standing at the back of the room with grief in his eyes, understood that the door he had opened was now being slammed shut. That evening, Elijah returned as always. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. He walked slowly, not with the urgency of hunger, but with the calm of someone drawn by something deeper than need. He stepped into the garden shadows and sat beneath the balcony, the photo still tucked in his chest. He closed his eyes, unaware that this night would not be like the others. Footsteps approached, but they were not gentle. A man in uniform, a security guard hired by the estate, appeared beside him. Without words, he reached down and grabbed Elijah's arm. Startled, the boy resisted, but the grip tightened. Rough hands yanked him to his feet. His blanket fell to the mud. The photo slipped from his pocket and fluttered to the ground. He tried to hold on, but they pushed him back, away from the balcony, away from the garden, away from the only place he had ever felt close to something that mattered. The mansion stood still. No curtain moved, no door opened. The butler stood in silence, his knuckles white as he gripped the frame of the attic window. And in that moment, he realized truth may rise, but power still chooses who hears it. Elijah was left on the street alone, again, but something inside him had changed. Something deep and quiet and unshakable. He was no longer a boy without a name. He was the son of Camille, the boy whose mother once laughed in that house, the child who belonged not just to a memory but to a legacy they tried to forget. He picked up the photo from the wet ground. It was smeared now, the ink bleeding like tears. But he still saw her face. And that was enough. Elijah turned his back on the mansion. But just as he took his first step down the street, a soft voice called his name from behind the iron gate. Not a whisper. Not a dream, a real voice, a familiar one. He turned slowly, and standing just inside the gate, her eyes wide with tears, was the old woman who had disappeared. Elijah froze. The cold no longer mattered. The mud beneath his feet vanished. All he saw was her, frail but steady, standing behind the wrought iron gate. The old woman whose eyes had once watched him from a distant window. Her silver hair trembled in the breeze, but her voice, though soft, carried the weight of years. She whispered his name again. And this time, it didn't feel like a stranger calling. It felt like coming home. Slowly, as if waking from a dream, Elijah stepped toward the gate. The metal creaked as she pulled it open, her hands shaking not from fear, but from hope too long buried. She reached out, touching his cheek with fingers wrinkled by time, but still gentle, still warm. In her face, Elijah saw something he had never seen in anyone else. A memory of someone he had never met. A reflection of his mother. Of Camille. She led him through the garden, past the jasmine bushes, past the balcony where he had slept for so many nights. The house loomed in silence, and for the first time, Elijah was not beneath it. He was inside its gates. The butler met them at the back entrance. No words were spoken. Only a nod, a silent exchange between two people who had both waited too long to act. Together, they took Elijah up the servant stairs, avoiding the grand hall where the man of the house sat in prideful ignorance. They brought Elijah to the attic. There, in that quiet room where the past had been sealed in boxes, the truth was waiting. Old woman handed him the leather-bound book. She opened it to a page where a photograph was pressed between paper. Camille, his mother, holding him as a baby. His small fist curled against her chest, her smile bright and real. And beneath it, in soft handwriting, Elijah, my morning light. Tears rolled down his face, not from pain, but from recognition. He belonged to someone. He was never forgotten, just hidden. The old woman took a key from her coat pocket. It was old, rusted. She led him down a narrow hallway and unlocked a door that had not been opened in years. The room inside was small but full of light. Dust floated in the air like memories suspended in time. This was hers. The look in her eyes seemed to say Camille's room. The walls still held pieces of her drawings, notes, a music box that played a lullaby Elijah had heard only in dreams. He walked in, touched the edge of the bed, and sat down slowly, as if afraid it might vanish. But it didn't. It held him. Outside the mansion, a storm began to rise again. But inside that quiet room, The boy who had once slept in the street now slept in his mother's bed. The door was closed, but not locked. For the first time, Elijah rested not in fear, but in peace. The old woman watched him from the doorway. She knew this was only the beginning. The truth would still face resistance, but it had a face now. A name, a heartbeat. And that heartbeat was Elijah, the boy who returned not by force, but by fate. And the mansion, after all its years of silence, finally remembered the child it had cast out. The blood never left. It simply waited at the gate until someone was brave enough to open it. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story. Sometimes the ones we forget are the ones we need the most. Elijah's journey reminds us that no matter how lost we feel, truth always finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear what part moved you the most. And please share this video with someone who believes in second chances, because everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves a home.